For the first time in Trinidad and Tobago's 59, I believe it is, 59 years of being an independent nation, an independent state, we are going to be without a police commissioner. Well, by the time you see this, we are already without a commissioner. We've been without a commissioner as of midnight between the 14th to the 15th, I believe, because our present acting commissioner, well, former present acting commissioner, his contract ended on the 15th, while they hired someone, the Police Service Commission hired someone, with the intent that this person, their contract stipulation was that they would serve as the acting commissioner until a substantive commissioner was found. So even if we didn't have a Police Service Commission, the contract that the other acting commissioner had would have sufficed in this case, but right in the nick of time, one of the justices of our High Court ruled that that appointment was actually unconstitutional. And truth be told, it seems like all other acting appointments that were made by the Police Service Commission without allowing the full process to run through, all the others would have also been unconstitutional, it seems. At least according to the ruling. We know that very often we'd see appeals in these rulings, and I think the Attorney General is speaking something about the appeals and something about the technicalities in what the rulings were. This entire thing has a confusing shade, and if you've looked at enough of my videos, when I see things getting exceedingly confusing, I tend to get very suspicious. But there's a bit of a confusing shade in it, because it kind of has you wondering sometimes who's on which side. It's a bit difficult to see the sides. I saw someone comment on the contemplation I made on this same topic, and they were saying this is the first time they've seen PNM and UNC united on the same side. And as someone actually reading the news articles and trying to pay attention a bit, I could tell you they aren't on the same side, but it's kind of difficult to tell which sides they are on. And in fact, I think some of them don't even know themselves. Personally, I think in particular, some of our opposition, they aren't sure. They can smell, it's like the sharks can smell the blood in the water, but they don't know exactly where the meat is. So what we're seeing a bit from the opposition, at least to me, is a bit of wild attacks. And nearly every time I see the opposition mount an offense or a defense of something, I can't help but continuously say, I see why they find it very difficult to appeal to people outside of their base. It seems like they are incapable of doing it sometimes. And that could explain why pretty much every time the UNC ever got into power, they had to do so by getting some kind of coalition with someone else. Because they appeal, the techniques that they use, the methods that they use to attempt to appeal to people, seems to me to be preaching to the choir. They've turned their back on the congregation and they're preaching to the choir. They're serving the Kool-Aid to only people who have drank the Kool-Aid before, if you understand what I mean. And the unfortunate thing about that, I find, is that very often what happens is they destroy some of the points that are there to be made. There are some pointed points, some pointed questions that could be asked, even in this whole police fiasco, that when the opposition goes through and politicizes the whole thing, it makes the questions now seem like just an opposition talking point, and they're thrown out like that. It could nearly seem like they all work together, can't it? But our Prime Minister says that the whole thing has a solution. You know, we don't need to worry about it. The sergeants can keep sergeanting and the inspectors can keep inspectoring, I believe. That was a quote from our dear Prime Minister. And he's in his typical nearly flippant way about it and making it clear that, you know, this is no big need to worry. Although it's something that hasn't happened since we were an independent country, oh, this is no great matter. PM, it's not without a solution. Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley said yesterday that the current state of affairs in which the country is without both a Commissioner of Police and a Police Service Commission was not a planned situation, but it is not without a solution. It is the first time since independence that the country has found itself in this predicament. The Prime Minister said the Deputy Commissioner MacDonald Jacob is now the most senior ranked officer in charge of all other officers in the service, as you would have heard me say weeks ago at a Saturday press conference, that an error was made and it will have certain consequences, which would have been sorted out in the court after the various conflicting legal opinions were advanced. That has now happened. So it is sorted. It is now for the president to make notifications to the parliament to fill the existing vacancies so that the new commission can follow the law as clarified in appointing person or persons to serve in the offices of Commissioner of Police and Deputy Commissioner of Police. So, it's no big deal, and, it's already settled in court now. It's just for the president to go about appointing a new commission and it's all settled. But I still think it's a big deal, and I don't think it's just an error was made, because from what the ruling in the High Court says, all other appointments of acting commissioners were erroneous. So the error in the legal standing of this appointment wasn't the issue that made this appointment so heated. And it's dishonest to pretend like it is. And it's lucky of the government that the opposition is fighting too wild to pin them down and ask pointed questions about this, because there are some very fishy things inside of there. But as it is, we still have no commissioner. I wonder, when you see those signs, no parking by order of commissioner and all of the other things by order of commissioner, if now they are null and void, there's no commissioner to put those orders there. I'm just asking, I'm wondering. But I think the flippant nature of the Prime Minister belies something that I tend to dislike about him. A kind of arrogance when dealing with the country that I think a lot of people do read into and they don't like either, especially if they already are in political opposition to you, and especially with the fact, like I keep repeating, if you pay attention to enough of my content, like I say pretty regularly, that the PNM does seem to have a more tendency towards the elitist side of things. I've explained that before. You could probably dig back through some of the old videos and see if you dig that up. But with those things in line there, when you respond too flippantly and seemingly arrogant to matters of serious national importance, it doesn't go over well. And the thing is, Trinidad is by and large a peaceful country when it comes to the general citizenry. They don't do too much of this civil unrest and thing because they're comfortable. But I think this pandemic poses some unique risks when it comes to that. And who knows? Our Prime Minister may very well be flirting with some trouble if he continues down that road. Let's see if we could dig into a little further of what I mean. And as we get into that, we're going to read Gary's response, because knowing him, of course he has a response. To be honest though, his response is a lot more tempered than his usual responses go. Gary, it's a frontal attack on democracy. Well, with the headline, it could seem a lot more dramatic than it actually turned out to be. Former Commissioner of Police Gary Griffith has described the series of events that led to yesterday's court ruling as a frontal attack on democracy and maintains that there was a calculated plan to remove him. He insists, though, that his service to country is not over despite a court ruling that has made his acting Commissioner of Police appointment null and void. This is not about Gary Griffith. This is about Trinidad and Tobago and our institutions. To this day, this minute, I am yet to be told what has been my crime and who is my accuser. And in general justice, in justice, how we know it in the Western world, what we consider to be fair justice, it's a person's right to at least know what they're accused of and know who is accusing them of it. So I believe that's what he is appealing to there. I have been asked to defend myself from something as of yet not spelled out, and as we confirmed that I was not the subject of any investigation. If, as the then sitting Commissioner of Police, this type of violation of principles of natural justice could be cast aside in the full view of the public by those with power, well then, this says much more about our institutions, systems, and leaders than it can ever say about me. He said in a statement after the ruling. And I agree, fully agree, completely agree with his statement there. This really and truly isn't about him and his personality and whatever you like or dislike about it. If in him and his personality, whoever dislikes him for it, they are able to do something that is so obviously underhanded, something that so obviously doesn't line up and doesn't pass the smell nor taste test, then it does say something about how our institutions run in this country. And bear in mind, which institution is this we're talking about? This is the police service. The police service in a country where the majority of the law-abiding citizens are unarmed. So these are the people who are supposedly standing between us and armed criminals. So these are the ones that are supposed to be our protectors. And our servants, really and truly, protect and serve. And as it stands, it seems like our institutions at the very top there don't have a good handle on the police service, or maybe have too good of a handle on the police service, which is supposed to be independent. Remember, the whole purpose of why this has so many complexities in the process is supposed to be to help it to be an independent police service. How is that working out for us? Griffith also took issue with a politician who told him to stay at home and referred to him as a civilian. Although he did not call a name, those comments were all attributed to National Security Minister Fitzgerald Hines in various media reports over the last few weeks. He said, "We are witnessing a frontal attack on our democracy. There is currently no regard for the separation of powers." Despite the Prime Minister stating recently that sergeants could keep sergeanting and inspectors could keep inspecting without a sitting commissioner of police, and whilst I understand this to imply seemingly there is no real merit placed on the office of Commissioner of Police, I still wish to take this opportunity to thank the Honourable Prime Minister for the opportunity. And yes, we know where that goes. And he went on to list his credentials and say that he's still there waiting for the next opportune and strategic moment to serve. But that's not something to gloss over. The former Commissioner of Police of our country is saying that currently there is no regard for the separation of powers. The former Commissioner of Police. This isn't someone who was former a decade ago or half century ago. This was someone who was former last month. And he is saying that there is no regard for separation of powers in our country right now. That is a scary indictment on Trinidad and Tobago. And especially when we line it up with things like what is happening right now in Barrackpore. I saw on a morning program, I believe on TV6, where their host was speaking about it, where the police went into some stores in Barrackpore and took their recordings and didn't display the warrants, just took it and left because they're prosecuting protesters who burn tires in the streets. Now, I understand the legality of everything, and it's illegal to burn tires in the streets, but I could also understand why the protesters could point out there seems to be a disparity. Why are they now hunting tapes and records to find some random protesters who burn tires in the streets, while protesters been burning tires in the streets since Eric Williams' days? Protest probe. Cops search houses after Barrackpore burns. Police have executed search warrants at the homes of at least 3 businessmen in Barrackpore looking for evidence to build a case against residents involved in protest action against bad roads and irregular water supply in the area. Now, you must admit, you could see some irony in prosecuting residents for damaging their roads while they are protesting that you aren't fixing their roads. Really, you must see the irony in that. The residents want their roads fixed, so they aren't getting heard. They do something to attract your attention and you prosecute them for it. You are playing dangerous games doing that, I think. And the story goes that there was a Nissan Primera parked in a street, in a track, and police went up to the driver left the vehicle there, And when they returned, they saw the vehicle damaged and things missing. And it seems like there may have been some recorded footage of it, because the businesses right next to where the incident happened were raided afterwards by multiple police officers who claimed to have warrants that they didn't show. And now they have the people's recordings that they refuse to retain. Now, I don't know the full details of these stories. It may very well be that the police may have a very good reason for doing what they're doing. But here's where we're playing with fire. And not the fire of just the protesters protesting for better roads. This is Barrackpore. If you know Trinidad, you know that Barrackpore is in the heartland of the opposition strongholds. If you have a police service already being accused by their former commissioner of there being some kind of interference there, and there not being a proper lineup of separation of powers, if you have that happening, and then you have police heavy-handedly hunting people, residents of an area who are protesting for better conditions in their area, be it as it might be that they may have a political angle to it. Obviously, this is Trinidad. Many of these things do have political angles. But when you have a police service that seems to be prosecuting or acting in a biased manner, already where there seems to be some shady activity at the top, and then you add that in some of the more difficult times of the pandemic, when we are in a state of emergency and people's livelihoods are very regularly being placed in the balance, I think it's a risky game to play. I do hope that our police service is rectified very soon and we see some order being restored inside of there. But until then, we observe. That's all I have for now. I hope you're educated, informed, or entertained. And do click that like button. Tap it. Smash it. Make sure it's selected. Drop a comment. Tell me what you think. Would you miss good old Double G? Or are you looking onwards for the future? And do you think that this whole thing went over smoothly and there was no shady activity? It was just an error. And the Prime Minister is right. It is now solved and we can move on. Tell me what you think in the comments, and if you aren't yet subscribed, please do subscribe. And I'll see you again for the next video.
Feel the music, rising with the time.